we're going to get started with our last but not least speaker, of course. You guys can't see it. There's a small little fire here. Fireside chat. So we've got
Yeah, some more.
Ferdinand and Stacy, and I'm told they're going to talk about money. So
Yeah,
excited.
I mean, we're all here and saying, where's the money, right? Stacy Vaughn, D Unity Group, AFCEA Small Business VP. And I will tell you, advantages of going to an association like that will help you grow your business. I was a government person mandated to go to AFCEA, and then I went and owned a business, and now support it in that aspect. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because everybody's talking about smart city, was the infrastructure bill, and people don't understand that smart city is in that infrastructure bill. And its infrastructure bill does not mean just the roads, even though Atlanta needs more roads, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to bring an expert. He has helped our team a lot in breaking down this infrastructure bill, because I only know so much from a government side, from DOD, that perspective. This young man knows more on the DOT aspect. So this is Ferdinand. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this is a very long day, but you know, as small business owners, we're going to talk about some money. How about that? Okay, so I'm Ferdinand Risco, and you know, as Stacy mentioned, I do have some experience with DOD, and you know, I started my career as a young Army officer. So when the colonel was talking about being a combatant commander, I was back there twitching a little bit. It was like, I remember my first GPS, in, you know, with the big long Garmin and the long arm that was, you know, big. It was crazy. I was having a good time back there chuckling. But I left the Army after a little parachuting accident and got into the corporate space, worked up and down the supply chain at Airborne Express before they became DHL, worked at Pepsi, moved 26 million cases of soda a year. Then I got into moving people, worked at Metro North Railroad out at Grand Central Terminal, did that for a few years, and then I had the opportunity to come to Atlanta and work at MARTA. At MARTA, I led the diversity practice, which included the Small and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. And so, you know, from the other side of the table, we were always looking for small business owners like you all to fulfill these hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in contract opportunities. And, you know, we always seem to miss the mark. And so it's great to be able to talk about, you know, the colonel's needs, and you know, the previous speaker talked about, you know, first responders, and, you know, where does data integration come in? And I think the infrastructure bill has got tons of it, and it may be a little hidden because, as you know, most times in the government, the names and acronyms don't necessarily always equate to what's down in the details. So hopefully my perspective will be able to give you a few of the tricks, tips, and secrets from the inside, and tell you how to really fund these projects. They're all great ideas. There's lots of demand. Lots of folks need you. And then hopefully we can give you a few tips on how to get there.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first question. Why should we really understand this bill? It's been passed. Some states have gotten their money already. How do we, as a business owner, figure out which way to go? Because it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's, you know, and I think the colonel mentioned it, you know, government acquisition is tough. But I will tell you that it is more about persistence and just following the rules than anything. You know, people always want to know what the secret sauce is, and I'm going to give it to you right now. So please, you know, write this down. Read the RFP. There's nothing the government isn't going to tell you that they want that's not in that document. And so it's, you know, tough to read through the jargon. It's tough to read through the criteria of selection. And, but, you know, once you understand the statement of work, you know, it's really, you know, then you make a go or no go decision. Can I do this? Is this really for me? Is this good for my business? And will it, you know, be profitable? And then you can start to dig into the other 914 pages that are left. But, you know, you go read that first and you really decide. And I'll tell you, when it comes to particularly cybersecurity, Not only the federal government, but we talked about SLED a little bit, the state, local, and the education folks. There's tons and tons of opportunity for data integration, tons of opportunity for cybersecurity, and so when you talk about how do we get there, it's really register your business. If you're able to certify as small, minority, woman, or veteran owned, please do that. That lessens the competition and puts you in a different category with less competitors. And so you do that, you move into, how do I really market and tell the government what I do? And so, we've got a great 9-step program that we work with. It's really about marketing, and then you go on to finding the opportunities and crafting a good solution for the government. Step 7 is understanding the solicitation itself, and then you have to build a team. There are very few of these multi-million-dollar projects that any of us will be able to do by ourselves, and so your team's right here. Team, joint venture, come together with your various specialties, put together a conglomerate, and really go after the big ones.
So let's talk about the who's on these agencies.
Yes.
Just to let you know, we have 93 agencies, 110 sub-agencies.
Yes. And so specifically for the infrastructure bill, there are 350 individual initiatives and programs that they've funded in the nearly $2.2 trillion law. That's a lot of money, right? And so there are 11 cabinet level agencies and then 5 commissions. And Paul and I talked earlier about, some of the avenues of approach. Of course, the Colonel and the DOD are going to buy lots of stuff, right? And they're going to, but what about the Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Energy, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, the Interior, EPA is on this list. And of course, the big one is DOT. It's a lot about roads and bridges, but what about ferries and ports? And all of that comes with a significant amount of data integration and a significant amount of opportunity around cybersecurity, particularly our ports. Inland ports, the big ones, there are tens of billions of dollars set aside for those particular programs. And so some of those agencies that you might not necessarily think of, and so there's plenty out there.
So you talked about Department of Transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that part, like bridges, roads. What else in that are we talking about in Department of Transportation?
Yeah, so roads, bridges, and major projects are $326,274,999,998.
Will change.
That's just a little bit, right? But then you have passenger and freight rail, public transportation, airports, ports, safety, and then electric vehicles. Just the electric vehicle portion alone is $18 billion. And so when we talk about data integration, that's the backbone of that industry. When we buy these electric vehicles, are you really buying the vehicle or are you buying the software that the vehicle powers, right? And so as we put more and more software packages into these vehicles, you think about, the opportunities and how the data is going to need to be integrated. But 18 billion on just electric vehicles, wow. Take my shot at that.
Yeah. So you talked about Department of Energy, mm-hmm. one of my favorite mm-hmm. agencies, but what other parts of that climate, energy, environment is real important for people to know? Sure.
We've got, clean energy and power. The Colonel mentioned the cyber fight is not necessarily a weapons war, but it's power grids, it's infrastructure, it's, our vulnerabilities are, we've got a few when it comes to our waterways, when it comes to, those kinds of things. So when you're talking about data and cybersecurity, take for instance, the clean energy and power section is $74 billion. A lot of that is going to be not about digging trenches or, reverting rivers. It's going to be about how do we protect those. And we know that that is definitely electronic warfare. We talk about the waterways, $64 billion for the waterways. But then there's another $37 billion on just resilience. And that's where a lot of the cybersecurity actions are laid. And then, of course, remediation. You know, it's only 21 billion there. That's it.
That's all.
That's it.
So so we'll go right into the technology aspect. What kind of technology programs besides the obvious broadband, right?
Yeah.
In the rural areas?
The big piece of the infrastructure bill that's called out specifically around technology is a lot of it is around broadband. How are we closing the digital divide with our rural communities and our urban communities? And so I will tell you to take broadband just a step forward. When I ran a transit agency, you know, there were Wi-Fi devices on 221 buses roaming around the city with 13 cameras, mobile payment. And so nobody thinks about those kinds of things. You know, when I worked at MARTA, we were putting in, you know, the cameras on buses and trains, also Wi-Fi. Things that we take for granted are opportunities for, you know, data integration and how we protect that data. These systems are not as advanced as we would like them to be, so that provides a significant opportunity for businesses like yours to be able to get in the game, either singly or collectively, but plenty of opportunities to advance, you know, your business.
And the cybersecurity. I mean, that was the heart of this conversation today with smart cities. What's some of the monies that can be spent for that?
Yeah, let's take smart cities. I think that's one that, you know, there are several different layers. I mentioned the public transportation space, not only just the buses and, you know, that they're roaming hotspots, but then if you look at mobility as a service or some of the other concepts that we're all leaning into, you still have the last mile. So if you're connecting to a bike or a scooter or one of the ride sharing companies, you know, that data has to transfer, and of course it has to be secure. We talk about payment information. You know, MARTA is an example of taking payments across the counties that they touch. So if it's Cobb County Transit or Gwinnett County Transit or any of those others, well, there's a clearinghouse in the back that is taking those payments and rerouting them. And of course, you know, could you imagine hacking into that and what kind of breach that would be? So there's, you know, there are things that I don't think folks are necessarily thinking about top of mind in this infrastructure bill, but smart cities is going to be huge. The data that you share between traffic lights and, you know, who's managed toll lanes are huge. Variable pricing, you know, when do we decide that the Peach Pass lane is going to be $40 and instead of, you know, 40 cents? You know, but 9 o'clock in the morning, or well, I should say 6:30 in the morning, for those who need to be to work at 9 o'clock, you know, you start to see just a tad, a little difference in the pricing there in that Peach Pass lane. But think about the data behind that, right? Think about each of those cars. Think about the payment structures behind that. And I think when it comes to the state and local contracting opportunities, coupled with the federal opportunities, again, we're back to billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars.
So I was wondering if so from an emergency management, fire, LE perspective. So if you want to push forward, you know, start at the bottom level, push forward a smart city, it's going to start with sensors and some kind of data integration piece of it, whether it's Cradlepoint, Meraki, whatever. How do you are there tools to bring those sensors, something that isn't traditionally part of the tech world? Does that fall under IoT? Does that fall under a fire/emergency management? Where do those things come into play?
Yeah, sadly, they've thrown everything into the bucket of IoT, right? The Internet of Things is just this big chasm of technology. I think as cities begin to mature, particularly at the municipal level, they'll begin to segregate and move some of those things out of that big bucket and put it into a sensors-only bucket, put it into you know, these various components where, you know, experts like you and the tacticians know and understand that should nowhere near be in that big old giant bucket. Sadly, when they're writing the RFPs or the request for proposals, they're not going to know that, right? So as a transit CEO, I wouldn't know to remove a sensor out. I'm just putting it in the big technology bucket and putting it in a technology paragraph. The thing that's going to differentiate you all and make you the successful bidder is that you're going to call that out and you're going to give them a solution, and you're going to provide that solution in your answer. And when you're stacked up against the rest, and 3 of the other companies have just answered the technology paragraph, but you had the wherewithal to break it out and chop it up a bit, then you naturally stand out. And of course, hopefully that leads to your success. But I will say that we don't know what we don't know. Lots of these companies, particularly the government agencies, are not going to know to do that kind of analysis or to have that kind of break in technology. So if it's through the unsolicited proposal process that some of them have, or it's a direct answer to a request, I think you call that out specifically and address how you and your company will be a bit different than the rest.
I would also say, Bill, is to think about not just here in Georgia. You got to think about these other states that are smaller. They're struggling. North Dakota is a great conversation. $1.9 billion, and they're like scrounging to figure out how do we get enough small businesses to do some of that work, because they're not as big as Georgia or Texas, where we know there's a lot of small businesses. We know that there's a lot of government agencies. They've got more processes in place. So think of it in that aspect for your business. Is think of these outlying states that don't have. Wyoming is another one, you know. So,
even just next door in Alabama.
Yeah.
We talk about, you can get to, Montgomery in what, about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours?
2.5 hours.
The amount of work that's down there for, less than a day's drive. You think you're 4 hours from Jacksonville. Everybody wants to do business in the Atlanta metropolitan statistical area, but go to Macon. Savannah has got significant opportunities. When Paul and I were talking, there's the Tennessee Valley Water Authority. Did you know that Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida have been in the Supreme Court fighting over the Chattahoochee River for years?
Mm-hmm.
How much money do you think they're getting? Right? Yeah. How much money do you think contracts are to secure how much water is let out from Tennessee? And the oyster folks down in Florida are complaining that you people in Atlanta are drinking too much water. And but all of those create problems, and problems create opportunities, and opportunities need to be solved. And the vast majority of them now are about data. And how do we integrate data? How do we use data? But again, I don't think that the procurement clerk at the Tennessee Water Authority in Valley is going to know to separate the kinds of sensors that may be needed when you're tracking water flow across the state border. Yeah. Perhaps they are. I don't know. Would venture to say probably not, but I can't say for sure. I think, but again, from your perspective, that's an opportunity to be a differentiator. That's an opportunity to stand out. That's an opportunity to win the business.
And the funding is funneled down to that level?
Yeah.
Yes. So there are, as I mentioned, a couple of specific commissions that are called out. But again, I think, when we look at the state and local levels, the federal government is funding those programs directly. The city of Atlanta is going to get a ton of money. The state of Georgia is getting billions and billions of dollars. But we all know those big states that everybody is going to go after. New York, California, Florida, Texas, right? If you look just to the left or right of any of those borders, you will find a state that's neglected. Texas, go to Oklahoma. California, go to Nevada. Arizona, you can go to Wyoming. There are tons of opportunities. We mentioned Georgia, go to Alabama. Florida's going to get enough business. But what about South Carolina? You can get to Greenville, South Carolina in about 2.5 hours.
2 hours.
There's another pocket of South Carolina money. It's a big city for them up there. But, when we look at it from our perspective, it might not be the largest market around. But great opportunities, less competition, less focus from other firms. So gives you a great avenue of approach.
It's not, but I'll take the money at the end of this. So, example, last fall, I helped write a grant request to get about $30,000 for six air packs, right? and it was extremely challenging, extremely challenging. So I'll be the dumb guy in the room and say, how do I get help? Do I reach out to a guy like Mr. Cisco and say, hey, how do I write this? What do I put in there? What do I do? Is there a Doc Ask Jeeves?
So, well, it's funny you not ask Jeeves, but what about Chat GPT, right? Folks are really looking to use AI to write their proposals. Please don't.
Please don't.
I will tell you, it will know. It will know. Having sat on the other side of the table, reading these binders after binder, you can pick up on it. And so, what the agency or institution is looking for is a genuine response to a problem. They're suffering. They don't want you to be a great prompt writer. And so you've got to be able to, even if the great prompt writer, you get a great response from, AI to help you write it, you still got to be able to perform too.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I also attend the Pipeline Programmers User Group, and one of the gentlemen that helps coordinate it works with a mortgage company here, actually in Midtown. Their technology is advancing now, so you can actually put the machine learning and the algorithms into ChatGPT. So in this case, you might have an app where people apply for a mortgage and say, this is my credit score, this is my income, this is my job, whatever. And then it will respond. You can put the algorithm into it so that it will respond.
Right.
There are a few services that are out there now that help you write proposals. And to get back to your question and give you a definitive answer, I do business coaching. I will coach you through the process. I don't do the writing. There's folks like the D-Unity group that are absolutely capable. I help them on that team from time to time on how to get through the process. It is daunting, but I think a clear step-by-step method helps get folks through that. Tim does some work with the team, and he's been amazing at capture management and how do you actually, I won a $30 million contract. Now what do I do, right? It's kind of like the chasing the dog chasing the car. There's plenty of that too. There's a whole bunch of rules, and so I think really relying on an expert does help. If nothing else, it saves you time. And as we know, we only have our time and talents to sell.
Well, and I was kind of looking at specifically from the government, from the fire department. How do you write that grant to ask for that money? Not necessarily to win a proposal, but you're asking for that money from the Homeland Bill, aside from a Byteworks or that's a very challenging process because you don't necessarily know that technology. You need something better. So from what's your experience of government to government grant connection? Federal to local.
State or
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, they generally use the request for information process first. I have a problem. Who in the marketplace can solve this for me? So you'll see the RFI. You'll see the sources sought is also another avenue where they ask the marketplace, who can solve this problem for me? I've got 12 pedestrian deaths on this corner between 12 and 6 in the last 3 years. I need to do something. And then they ask the marketplace. So you can look for it in a couple of different ways: request for information, request for qualifications, sources sought. And so that's the government saying, I have a problem that I really don't need to solve, and come help me solve it, which is a way for you to influence the process. And so those things generally turn into RFPs, requests for proposals. So now you've influenced, in a very legal and good way, here are some things that are in the marketplace. Here's the innovation that we have that nobody else has. And so then you can help yourself along the way as well.
And to add to that, you could do unsolicited white paper at that point too, because you could say, we noticed the following. These are the things that may help support what you're looking for in that aspect. So that might help you in that perspective.
And if you remember, the Colonel talked about the acquisition planning process and how long that is. that's an opportunity to jump into and say, hey, you know, I've got a great and wonderful gadget, or I've got the super top secret sensor that only we have and no one else has in the world, and I think this would solve your problem, and here's how. So you give them a little bit, you tell them what you can do, not how you can do it, and then you can help to influence that process a bit.
And if some of you guys want the information for the state of Georgia, if you want to text me your email address, then I can send that to you. It's 678-701-8495. Just tell me it's from AFCEA, and I'll send you guys the breakdown of the information for Georgia so you get an idea. But just to give you an idea, in Georgia we have 1.5 million areas that do not have internet, family members at a level. So I always say you got the state of Atlanta, and then you got the rest of Georgia. So those are great opportunities for small businesses to go out in those rural areas to get broadband. The big one I learned from Ferdinand was water. You just don't realize how important that is in this state of what we're dealing with. So
yeah, when we talk about environmental protections, we talk about clean air. Water is a big piece of this infrastructure bill. And just briefly, to date, there's been $5.3 billion that's been announced here in Georgia just since the law was passed. So there's tons of money here. The roads and bridges obviously are going to get the big lion's share of that. But again, right back to water, and $360 million has already been announced here in Georgia just for water. And so there's lots of opportunities, and I can't tell you, stress enough that having reviewed these proposals in ad nauseum for years, really consider teaming and joint venturing. Your partners are in the room. You're already, you know, building a great network. I would suggest really thinking about how the organization can to do more of this. Not only talk about the opportunities and the needs. You know, the Colonel and you know, Mr. Watkins talked about the need, but now you know where the money is, and collectively, you know, I would suggest brainstorming, getting together, and really going after it, because there's a tremendous amount of runway for you.
great. Any other questions, thoughts?
I will tell you, as a great infantry officer that I think I was, situational awareness is key, and I'm going to thank you all for your time. I think at the end of the day, hopefully, you can hear about a couple of $1 billion to get you excited and get you off to the next thing.
So you mentioned about the sled in the big market. Hey, basically when we look at the benefit of sled, and you're Georgia, let's focus on Georgia, maybe Alabama, maybe 46. But you mentioned not just the Wyoming, all those, you know, states which don't have, which have money, but not enough small businesses resources.
Right.
So, is it worth looking at other states and the neighboring states?
Yep,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And so I would say, particularly if you can certify as a small minority woman or veteran-owned business or even disadvantaged business, any of those certifications, you can go straight to whoever the liaison officer is for that particular program. Yeah, I served as the DBE liaison officer, and I can tell you that when they are looking for participation goals, the first thing they do is look for availability in the database. If you're not present in the database, you don't exist.
Yeah, so the DOT, Department of Transportation, DBE, is really important because they do a reciprocation. So if you are certified in Georgia, the other states will reciprocate and honor it. So it's really important for you guys to know that. DBS.
Disadvantaged Business Enterprise.
Yeah. DSBS? No.
I'm not sure what
Yeah.
that one is.
Yeah.
But again, wherever you can, you know, for the federal solicitations, sam.gov is the be-all, end-all. You know, for the individual states, but you know, when you mentioned SLED, you know, has anybody thought about the university system of higher
Mhm.
education.
Yeah.
It's a lot of.
There's a lot of money in there.
That's a hidden gem.
Yeah.
And you talk about the amount of data that they have and what they have to do with it to secure it. As it relates to Title IX, there's a ton of opportunities. And so I would close with suggesting that you take a deeper dive into the infrastructure bill. Even if you just scan the bill and search for cybersecurity, you'll find that the titles of the individual 350 individual programs may not necessarily let you believe that there's data or cybersecurity in there, but 90% of them have some sort of component that I think this group would be very, very apt to handle.
Great.
I think our
Awesome.
fire's dying.
Yeah, fire's dying. So thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.